If you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the business of lifelong learning, you're in the right place. I'm Celisa Steele.
And I'm Jeff Cobb, and this is the Leading Learning Podcast.
Hey there, we are back with a second installment in our after-action review for learning technology design. And in case you missed the first installment, we spent some time talking about the overall concept behind the event and kind of the framework that we applied to it. And you can get that, get the show notes for that, and also get that episode at leadinglearning.com. Episode 35. And of course, you can get the show notes for this episode at leadinglearning.com, episode 36. And again, in that last episode, we really talked about, what learning technology design was supposed to accomplish, kind of the concepts behind it, and then also just kind of the framework that we brought to it, what we characterize as really a questioning framework that we applied to particularly the full group sessions that we had at the event. But the full group sessions weren't all that the event was about. We had quite a lot of content beyond that.
So beyond those full group sessions, we also both days had morning workshops, your choice of one of two longer length workshops, so an hour and 45 minutes, or your third choice was to go to a grouping of 3 content pods, and content pods is our term for kind of shorter, really focused content presentations that are then followed by ample time for Q&A. So that was the choice. We put the workshops in the morning based on some actually feedback from the symposium, with the idea that people are kind of fresher and more able to focus and engage in something like that in the morning. So that's why we put them there. And we also knew that not everybody was going to necessarily want to do kind of that longer time commitment around a particular subject. So we wanted to offer not just a choice of workshops, but also kind of that different approach with the content pods.
Right. And, and we should say, at the point that we're talking now, we're about to put an evaluation out. We haven't done the evaluation. We haven't gotten that back. And that's sort of purposeful. We want to talk just sort of based off of our own impressions before we're influenced by, whatever we hear back. But at least, with respect to those workshops and with respect to the content pods that were going on at the same time, felt like we got good feedback on those. That the people who did want to dig deep on a particular topic, obviously they had that opportunity. They could do it. And I know at least in the 2 workshops that I was involved in, leading one on marketing mastery and working with you on learning platform selection, and another one, people were definitely engaged. I mean, there was a lot of discussion. There was questioning going on, and
questions.
Good. Questions, always questions, and and I think some very substantive learning was able to go on. I didn't even get to see any of the content pods because I was doing a workshop both mornings. So you'll have to say, how that went from your perspective.
Well, I thought so I got to see the content pods on day 1, because as you mentioned, day 2, I was leading one of the workshops, but I thought that it went really well. We had interesting topics and then good questions around it. And, we had enough time for questions, but there were questions, that kind of filled the available time. And so it felt like a nice mix of, okay, let's get someone who can share something concrete. We had Dr. Brian McGowan there talking about his experience with a few really serious flipped classroom experiences, and sharing that data, sharing that experience, the lessons learned, and then had, good questions around that. We had, other topics as well, but I think it was a nice mix and kind of kept a nice pace.
Yeah, and I think it was a good mix. In we should say, to the extent it hasn't been clear already, I mean, we did a lot of work ahead of time, going out to prospective attendees and then actual registrants, asking them about, their challenges, what they're really wrestling with, to extract from that the topics, and then of course, we have our own opinions about what organizations should be thinking about right now, because we're out there, every day, and we do this stuff ourselves. I thought it was a really good mix. Flipped learning, I thought, you interviewed Brian, and we'll link to that podcast as well.
You interviewed Brian.
Did I interview Brian? I interviewed Brian.
You interviewed Brian.
Wow, I tell you, it's a blur, isn't it? We're now on episode 35 here. It's hard to remember what all has happened. But yeah, I mean, incredibly smart guy. But then we had, Tadu Yimam giving a talk on podcasting, which we did record the content pods, and we need to review that. And as long as they look good and people are open to it, we'll put out some or all of those. But I know, I want to hear what she had to say about podcasting. Mark Nillis talking about using Booster Learn for reinforcing learning over time. Layla Masri talking about kind of usability issues related to conversion, getting people to actually make the journey to making the purchase on your website and how to make that happen better. So nice mix of learning and marketing and technology type stuff going on in the content pods.
Yeah, and Diane Elkins talking about kind of just good design tips that would boost learner engagement, So yeah, it was a nice range of topics, I think, and some of them were kind of, experience case study driven. Some of them were more, I did one around kind of cutting edge technologies, which got a little less practical, but a little bit, I think, interesting in terms of, what's on the horizon, what do we need to be thinking about. So it was a nice mix of topics and kind of both practical and maybe a little bit more, what should we be thinking about?
And I could tell you were already starting to, go on long enough in this after-action review. I think we'd been talking about just doing this as a single episode, but as we've started pulling at the thread, it seems like it may be worth continuing to talk for a little bit. And you may be hearing us in episode 2 of this particular podcast. But let's move on to talking about what happened in the afternoons. And again, all of this is framed by that sort of questioning framework, the opening and closing sessions that we talked about earlier. But, we've had the morning workshops and the option for the content pods if you don't want the workshops. But then after lunch,
we had hour-long workshops on day 1. We had 2 hour-long workshops, and you had your choice between 2 at each of those time slots. And then on day 1, we had you had your choice of 1 of 2 1 hours. So we had 3. You had a chance for 3 what we called app labs. So the idea was that these were going to focus a bit on the application of ideas and hopefully get people to really be digging in and thinking about, okay, how does this apply to me? What can I do? And we had app labs on things like micro learning and on digital badges and webinar mastery, things like that.
Yeah, and we haven't gotten evaluations back, so we don't know definitely, how those were received. But I know, for example, I was in the session with Josh Goldman talking about microlearning, so I was able to witness that one firsthand. That was packed. I think in retrospect, if we'd sort of thought about that, we had a little bit of difference in the size of the rooms. Could have potentially put him in a bigger room. But that was a little hard to balance. But in any case, nobody seemed to care because everybody's really engaged in that particular room. Josh just really knows his stuff around microlearning. He's one of the few associations. He's with the Ohio CPAs. Who's actually done it. Plus, he's just a smart guy in general.
I was going to say, he's just really smart in general.
and he was able to really lay out what microlearning is, but then also give the specific case study around what they did and really engage people in thinking about how they could actually leverage this for their organization, the pros and cons, and frankly, some of the blather that's out there right now around things like brain science that's being used to sell microlearning, which he pointed out a lot of that isn't necessarily true with a big T, as he puts it, and that organizations need to be cautious about some of the claims that are being made about microlearning, but that it does just have a lot of potential within learning models. And he's less bullish about what potential it has within business models, but that's there as well, and then he did discuss that.
So maybe we should talk a little bit more about the role of the exhibitors that we had there.
Yeah.
Because we've actually felt like it was really important at a learning technology design event to have some companies that have platforms and services and tools out there involved, because we felt like it would be important to the extent that attendees hadn't had a chance to look at some of those systems or talk to people representing them, that would be really a useful aspect of it.
Yeah, and so we really wanted to try to break down some of the traditional walls between exhibitors and attendees that we've always experienced from both sides of the aisle.
We've been vendors ourselves.
That's right. It's been a while, but in any case, we wanted to make it clear that any company that was there as an exhibitor, as a solution provider, we wanted them. They were welcome for full participation in all of the parts of the event. So sitting at the table, in any of the workshops or app labs or whatever.
And not only welcome to encourage.
Yes, absolutely. That was really, in fact, not even, that was the expectation, that they were actually, participants, attendees at the event, just like everybody else. They just also happened to have a table where they could talk about the products and services that they provide. And then we did, we put them in the main room where everybody was, for a significant, part of the event, all of the opening and closing sessions, the content pods, lunch, and we were open, an hour before things really kicked off and people did, we didn't really kick off things until 9:30 on each day. We opened at 8:30 and most people were there, between 8:30 and 9 and, starting to congregate and talk to exhibitors and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And so I think that it was good in terms of our expectation, of having that expectation. I think that, maybe we need to do in terms of the after action review and thinking about it. I think maybe we need to try to emphasize that even more. I think that's a natural way of being at events for some of the companies that were there, that they tend to just be there and act as learners and, they go to sessions, all of that. I think for others, that's not necessarily how they're used to interacting at events, and they're kind of more used to being tethered to their table and kind of, open during exhibit times and trying to play catch up on work, during the rest of the day. But so I think we need to probably do an even more active job of conveying our mindset, our ideal way of thinking about how that they would just be attendees like anyone else.
Yeah, and I think there is a very real sort of cultural barrier between attendees and exhibitors in many instances, and I think many attendees in an event can be reluctant to actually walk up and engage with an exhibitor because they feel like that's going to commit them to something, and that and they know they may not have a need right now. They certainly may not have a budget right now, so they're reluctant to just engage in a conversation that could actually be extremely fruitful conversation. And that's a difficult barrier to break down. I mean, I think the best we can say about this is we're going to have to work at it over time, get more input from attendees, get more input from the solution providers and exhibitors, and what can we do to make sure that good, substantive, meaningful conversations happen that are actually going to be very helpful to both sides. So we had some of it. I'd give us maybe a B minus on that. I think we made a good effort at it, but we have a lot of room to grow there.
So since we are getting a little long, maybe we should just talk about the fact that as we wrapped up LTD, we didn't think of it as an end because we don't really see this as a one-off event. Yeah, and we said that the same thing about the symposium, that really it's part of an overall approach to community, really, to trying to connect people that we feel traditionally have not necessarily had great opportunities for connecting, to help to try to facilitate that and engender that and hopefully keep it going over time. We've made a big effort with that with the symposium, and we actually have even an online community going around that. With learning technology design, I think mainly, we wanted to make sure that we were providing ample opportunity for people to be, in conversation with each other. I mean, that's part of the reason for opening early each day was for the exhibitors to get some traffic, but at least as important was just to give people a place where they can come and commune and talk, which, as we said, a lot of people did. We provided ample time during lunch for that to happen. We tried as much as possible to encourage, but certainly during our general sessions, but then also during each of the content segments that were throughout the day, interactive
type learning where people really were talking with each other and having conversations, and again, stressing, what did you bring? How are you going to help other people here? And at least the feedback we got in informal conversations with people around kind of the kinds of connections, the kind of conversations that they were having, that was happening. We're not going to walk out of this one event and suddenly have, everybody bonded tightly for life, and sharing their professional practices on a daily basis. But I know a lot of people coming out of this are going to stay in touch with each other. Every time we come back together, whether it's for this or anything else we do, that community is going to be, tighter and tighter. So we hope over time that we really are building something for which this event just represents sort of, one point in time in which that broader community comes together. But as it goes back out into the world, it's still staying connected.
And I think it's a benefit of it being a relatively small event that people can have that type of conversation and connection, and you really feel like, oh, I actually got to meet a really large number of the people who are here, and you don't have the sense of, it wouldn't really matter if I weren't here because it's so many thousands of people that, no one would miss me. I think that really encouraged the participation and made it possible for people to make connections. So I think, while we'd like to grow the event, I don't think we're headed anywhere huge. Certainly not anytime soon, but even just on principle, I don't think we're headed anywhere huge because of that in terms of numbers, because we really like that quality over quantity.
Right. So I guess, end of the day, as we look at what we set out to do, what we were expecting to happen, all in all, I feel like it was successful. Certainly, we were able to bring together more than 100 people for learning technology design, really have what seemed like some meaningful interaction. I mean, I think, things that we will strive for, I know, going forward is, how do we frame each of these events? I think we were successful this time in how we framed it, but we have to ask that, every time we come around, what's the context this time? How do we really make sure we're providing the right framework for connecting the dots here and really helping learning to happen? So that, that's always going to be a challenge, and I think we did okay with it this time, but we have to keep our eye on that. We made a big effort at getting the right content, the right topics, which I think we did. It's always going to be a challenge, as I think it is for every organization, to really focus on, I guess I'd say that the talent that you bring to the table, who those speaker facilitators are, who you're involving in the event overall. And, again, I think we were very fortunate to have some great people involved this time, but we're going to have to, stay on top of that and make sure we're really finding great people who get the idea of, not just being the sort of stand and deliver, but really facilitating learning in the sessions that they're running.
And that gets back to community, that it's about building that community. It's about us, right, finding the right people, bringing them in and helping them connect with others. And the same way that we're talking about breaking down barriers kind of with the solution providers or exhibitors, I think the same thing with the speakers, facilitators, that really... I would love to have that sense of we really are all part of the same community. There's not kind of a distinction or separation, that you can talk and that everyone is willing to share their experience and expertise, whether they have that label of speaker facilitator or not. But certainly the ones that do, feeling really good about what they're bringing to the table. Yeah.
So, out of the gate, what we set out to do, what actually happened. I think they were pretty close this first time out, and there are certainly areas for improvement. But looking forward to that opportunity for improvement. So for everybody listening, this is hopefully the first of many, and the website for the event will remain the same. It's ltd.leadinglearning.com. So if you didn't have the chance to be at this year's, we still encourage you to go check that out. You can see what the schedule was, everything that we've been talking about here. But we'll also put a sign up there for people who want to be notified, as early as possible for when we announce next year and open up registration for that. Bonus for that is anybody who signs up for that is going to get the best rate for the event because they'll hear about it earlier than everybody else. I guess beyond that, we ended the event itself with a quote from E.E. Cummings. Maybe we can end this podcast with that same quote.
Always a beautiful answer. Who asks a more beautiful question?